What's up, you all? What's up, you all? Welcome to the Left-Handed Leftist. You all, I just realized I haven't done one of these, before the show starts, monologues in a minute, and I think I'm going to get back into doing them. But without further ado, let me go ahead into it that we are having a really, really, really good conversation for you all today. I'm going to be talking with a congressional candidate who's running in Maryland's 3rd district. We're going to be talking about foreign policy. We're going to talk about Palestine, Cuba, Israel, Venezuela. We're going to talk about ICE. We're going to be talking about, can the Democratic Party actually be moved left? And you all, before we get into it, let me go ahead and introduce who our candidate is. I will be talking with Austin Dyches. He is a veteran and a congressional candidate in Maryland's 3rd district. And one thing I do want to give a huge apology to Austin Dyches, because it was multiple times within this podcast I actually called him by the wrong last name. So I do just want to say my apologies off the bat for that. And then one other thing I do want to say is that you all, before we get into the episode, please remember this is a podcast, so we need your support by liking, sharing, hitting that subscribe button, rating us 5 stars, do all the things that keep our podcast going and our podcast thriving, you all. We're hitting some really, really, really good milestones, so let's keep it going. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so that every Wednesday you can get notified of a new episode that comes out. So without further ado, you all, let's get into it. So what's up, you all? Austin Dyches, what's up? So glad to have you here. How's it going?
It's going all right. Thanks so much, Carlos. Appreciate you having me on.
Of course. We need to highlight more actual leftist candidates and more progressive people, because you would think in the state of Maryland we're like, leftist, progressive blue. We're really not. We're very moderate, conservative blue. So glad to have you here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So for the viewers who do not know who you are, do you mind just telling people real quick who you are and what you're running for?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So for those at home, my name is Austin Dyches. I'm running for Maryland's 3rd congressional district. I'm a veteran, a father. I'm a progressive Democrat. I consider myself a democratic socialist, and I'm running on a platform of universal health care, abolishing ICE, ending the wars in Israel, ending foreign aid to Israel, bringing that money home and rebuilding America, and what I would hope is a positive Green New Deal for America.
Wow. Okay, that was incredible already. I mean, go ahead, wrap it up. We called it a day. We did everything.
No.
You checked all the boxes. No,
don't. You got to hold me accountable. Dig in.
No, definitely. So let's go ahead and get into it. First thing I do want to kind of get into is the foreign affairs. And you mentioned that you are a veteran who was in the military. Can you kind of talk about what you did in the military, and then we can get into Palestine, Iran, and stuff like that?
Sure, yeah. I wasn't someone who had originally considered myself the military type, even though I was raised very conservatively. So I was raised in a conservative household in Oklahoma and Texas. My father worked for Halliburton and oil companies my whole life. So we were literally, in West Texas, as conservative as you get. But one of the things that I had always felt strongly about, and my whole family, was that, the call to serve our country, and for me, so my brother had joined the Army first. So he was in the 101st Airborne. He went to Afghanistan and actually got hurt there. Is okay, but came home and continued his military career. He's retired from it now. But at the time, I was actually in my first year of law school. So I was attending the Oklahoma City University School of Law, because I'd always sort of, I love law. I love legal studies. And so I finished my 1L year. And my brother had joined, and he was like, hey, it's something that you got to do or whatever. And I said, okay. I did feel strongly at that time that I did want to serve. So ISIS was actually a big, that was when ISIS was hot and heavy. A little later on as the war continued. And so my experience was a little different in that I went in kind of I went in as an older person knowing what I wanted to do. And so in the Army, I served as what's called a human intelligence collector, which is essentially an interrogator, or someone who goes out and does military source operations to talk to locals and figure out where someone might be hiding. So that's what I was trained to do. However, I never actually did that overseas because I was here in Maryland at Fort Meade. Things work a little bit differently. And they said I had shown some interest in computers and networking. And so I actually became a digital forensic analyst. So I became a counterintelligence digital forensic special investigator.
Ooh.
So our job was to collect media devices from people we thought might be helping the Russians or the Chinese or some other folks, and we would get those devices, and then my job was to look through them. And that's what I did. So later on, I did that for the Defense Intelligence Agency as well. So after my service, I got out and for DIA deployed to Afghanistan as part of Operation Enduring Freedom for the ISIS-K mission. So that's kind of what I was involved in very early on. But one of the things that I think is so important as a distinction between what we think is going to happen and what actually happens. And as someone who has seen the whole cycle and been through the whole cycle of wanting to do the right thing, signing up to do the right thing, realizing that you as an individual cannot affect this machine in the way that you thought you might have, and that everything that you sort of imagined was either propaganda or told in a way that didn't tell you the full story. And so as I was the kind of person, I was the liberal in my family. I was the lefty, right? They were like, "Oh, Austin, he thinks people should have rights."
Ooh, hot take.
Exactly. And so even in the military, I came into it from a what can I do? I hate to say what can I do from the inside because it's so hubristic, but I think we need to address the fact that for a cishet white man in the United States, the call, what we think we're supposed to do is so strong. And what I want to tell people about that is that I would never hold it against service members for serving, but I do think that veterans have to own our place in imperialism and understand that while you may not have understood what exactly you were getting into at the time, you know better now. And now that you know better, it's very, very important that we speak out. And so that's why I'm such an anti war advocate. I have seen very closely, you know, people harmed by these policies. I have watched, um, I, you have to do things that are difficult. And at the end of the day, when our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and guardians come home, you don't want it to say, well, did you know that ISIS was mostly the remnants of the Saddam's army and that was Rumsfeld? Do you want to? It's hard to have the knowledge that maybe it was just for the shareholders, maybe it was for Israel, maybe it was actually not what we had assumed, or maybe the world is a complicated place where two things can be true at once. You can have someone like an ISIS or a Taliban who do awful things, but you have to recognize the context in which that is in. Why are we there? Why did we go? What are we doing here? And and I think that policy and that kind of like the way of viewing the world, we've got to, as a society, as a country, start viewing our defense as defense. I don't think anyone would look, many of my friends who look at somewhere like China as someone who could say there are some policies that we can take from there, right? There are very good things that we think that they're doing and we can learn from that. And one of those things is their military, right? They have a strong national defense, and yet you don't see them invading other countries. You don't see them, like they're in their territorial waters, but they're not over here, right?
Mind their business for the most part.
Right, and so but we're there. And so what I would advocate for as a leftist, I need to be very careful because I am not for a massive military for no reason. I believe in a strong national defense, but if the Pentagon cannot account for $1.7 trillion, it needs to be audited and that budget needs to be slashed. And I think whereas I highly disagree, as someone who wants to represent one of the largest federal workforces in the country here in Maryland 3, I represent people that were harmed by Doge. And no one that I have spoken to has ever said, we don't think that there's waste, fraud, and abuse in places. We don't think that there's bloat. But the idea that you would, not that you would allow children to come in with their algorithms and slash jobs of professionals and families who've been here for decades and worked with researchers and scientists. That's not improving our national security. That's not helping anything. But it goes so much further than that. I would talk about, if you want to talk about real national security, how about we feed people? If you want to talk about real national security, how about we house people? How about we, rebuild our infrastructure so that people can get to work on time? A strong working class is a strong national defense. Like these things help themselves. Capitalism, is a parasite in the defense industry, just as it is in every other industry. The profit-seeking motive, whereby I heard someone say it once in a way that stuck with me, and is that I work for a defense contract. I work for a small cybersecurity defense contractor in Colombia, right? That's part of that machine. And the reason that my company exists is because the government can't hire scientists. I work in a highly technical area where these people with, these PhDs and these scientists that the government wants to hire, they simply can't afford to hire based on their current pay scales. So instead of doing that, they have these companies that will hire them and pay them more money, or an amount that's equitable to the commercials level, so they won't leave. But all of that is to say, there are inefficiencies everywhere, right? These inefficiencies can be addressed, but overall, I think as a veteran, we have to see this and say, it's great that we understand it, but what I do not I'm not I don't get behind Democrats who run veterans as a war hawk and say, if you're a Democrat and repeat the lie that Iran is trying to take over the Middle East, or you repeat the lie that we had anything else to do in Afghanistan or Iraq than what we were doing, those are not positions that a progressive candidate should hold. And I would advocate strongly against him. So, one of the things we've got to it goes all the way down. My working in the oil, or my father working in the oil industry for so long, I remember him telling me when I was very young that if oil ever gets around over $100 a barrel, it's very, very bad. And he's like, Austin, it's going to get really bad. And it's done that a couple times, in the last 15, 20 years. And it's been hard every single time. But again, more wars, more costs, gas prices go up. We're looming at a recession. I'm a millennial. This is my third recession, fourth
Oh,
war, whatever the tally is. And so, kind of wrapping up, it's not just myself who's a veteran, it's everyone since 9/11. I feel like the whole country has become a veteran in some way because we've been so militarized. Our whole society, after 9/11, when Toby Keith went from singing about being a cowboy to shock and awe, I remember the sort of it was a bad term. We all knew it was like, my friends and I in high school at the time were thinking, this is so jingoistic. We're not down with this. We don't care about this sort of thing. I remember them talking about, we were so upset at the time because the Patriot Act was hadn't even been enacted yet. It was still being debated. They were obviously going to enact it, but part of it was that the Bush administration was going to be able to go in and, back in the day when you went to the librarian pulled out the stack of cards and you pulled your card out and you signed
yep.
it, right? And well, they were going to be able to look through that and see what you had checked out at the library. And I just remember our friends, I think they can't do that. First of all, rest in peace to Dewey Decimal System, the greatest system ever
Yes.
invented. But we were just thinking they can't do that. And then, fast forward 25 years, we have ICE in the streets and, like they can and they will continue to do that. So as someone who has been on the front end of the war on terror, someone who was motivated to join and then realized, I understand now why the world is the way it is. I went in thinking, what can we do better? Because I was under the impression that the United States, for the better or for worse, was trying to do the right thing. And unfortunately, because both the Democrats and the Republicans are uniparty in their foreign policy, neither party was trying to do the right thing. They were trying to do the profitable thing at the expense of all of us. And so for me, a lot of about running is, like I said, one of the things about being raised in Oklahoma, Texas, or whatever is that you are raised on values that we take care of one another, right? You take care of your
Mm.
neighbors. Maybe you can place it in a chauvinistic framework, but it is worthwhile to say that if we can help one another, we should. And I've never had anyone explain to me why the golden rule doesn't stand. And the real problem for everyone else is that I still believe it. So, that's gonna be a problem for y'all because I'm sorry, but I have not been convinced that we shouldn't take care of one another. I've been deprogramming myself from the mindset of thinking that meritocracy is real and that, somehow I have lots to say about lots of different issues, but all of that is kind of a growth process from a place of being, hey, I want to join the military, to standing on the other side of it 20 years later and looking at the world, looking at the United States and seeing our place in it and saying, what was this?
No,
What did we do? And how did this make any of us safer? And the answer is it didn't.
no, you're definitely right. I mean, for the longest time, the military has been used to basically reign terror throughout the world and kind of really put the U.S. as this. We always say shining star on the hill, but really we're a huge bully to the other countries to kind of make you say like either comply or get destroyed. With that though, what was that kind of awakening moment for you, for someone who went in for what seems like all the right intentions? What was that moment that you had that you thought like, wow, like we're the bad guys in this?
I can say it's been a lot of little moments, and I think one of the things that's difficult about it is that you have to confront your cognitive dissonance, and you have to confront it. Feels bad. It feels bad to confront these ideas. And for me, it was engaging with a lot of my own community. So I'm a DSA member, right? And engaging with my fellow DSA members and them saying, Austin, that was messed up, or I don't agree that you did that. And having, having the capacity to reflect and say, what can I learn, without being defensive? What can I say that I agree with? What can I say that I can think about? And but I remember, so very specifically, being in the intelligence community, we very, how do I say this? We've been tracking the cycle of radicalization for people who get radicalized a long time. Like, we know how that happens. We actually used to joke that we were radicalizing ourselves. We would be watching the propaganda inside of, inside of our spaces or whatever, and be like, oh, he's, watch out, they're getting. But I want to say something true about that, which is that where there's a joke, there's a kernel of truth, in that the more exposure that one has to the internal workings and the real dirty, bloody dealings of the United States, you have to make that choice, whether you're going to push down that voice inside your head that says, I don't know if this is right, this doesn't seem right, or whether you're going to lean into it, wrap yourself in the flag, and say, I'm doing this for all the right reasons, and I sleep well at night, and no one can tell me otherwise. Because I find that those are a lot of, you either have people who are, have the capacity to internalize that, or they don't, you know. And what I would, what's hard about this, I want to tell everybody that, it's unfortunate that we have a government that's making the people who work in the security industry feel like they're doing something wrong, because we have been the bullies, right? We have been. And unfortunately, someone posted the other day, it said, how many beautiful, kind people have I killed just with my tax dollars? And I just thought, so when you ask the question of what turned me or radicalized me, it was a slow process, but seeing our actions. And, one of the things that I used to do as a digital media examiner was I had looked through hundreds and millions of images, difficult images of bombings and folks who have been injured overseas. And one of the things that, and these are all on terrorists' hard drives, right? These are all on terrorist media. I'm looking at their propaganda from their phones.
Wow.
But one of the things I realized is that, okay, it's propaganda, but who bombed that little girl in that photo? They didn't. You know what I mean? We did. Or Israel did, or one of our proxies did, And so as you continue to see the harm, you have to look at it and either address the reality that this is happening and that we need to see this for what it is, or it's not. And for me, that even meant taking a look back at history. I've been a vote blue no matter who guy my whole life. I voted for Gore. You know what I mean? Clinton was my first vote, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, back in Oklahoma. But we voted for all of these people, and I cried when Obama was elected. I was so excited. And then he bailed out the banks, drone strike 100 million people, and deported the rest of them, And I have to look back on that and say, that's what radicalized me. Going through the 2008 crisis, where my friends and I couldn't find jobs right out of college, that was like the canary in the coal mine, that the rest of our lives were going to be difficult because we didn't have elected officials who were willing to go to bat for us, even. And what I didn't understand at the time is that was never going to happen, because the fiscal policy and the foreign policy for the Dems and the Republicans are the same. But I was hoping, I had a lot of hope that there was going to be some change.
You and a lot of people.
I mean, I really did, and I really believed it. And I think that's why one of the reasons my campaign is not like this, the truly cringeworthy Mallory McMorrow video that just came out. That is not this campaign. I am so far removed from that fake joy. My joy is the joy of passionate expression, and we are going to grind these Republicans into the dust of history. Like, we are no longer coming from, because we've recognized that we can no longer ask. We can no longer beg and plead and say, centrist Democrats, Republicans, please give us some crumbs, please. And now, as a father, I am no longer willing to say, hey, my children, I'm sure that Sarah Elfreth will throw you some crumbs eventually, like, as long as Israel gets paid. And that's just something I'm no longer willing to accept. I'm no longer willing to accept the idea that we have to bomb children, that we have to do these foreign wars. Oh, and I got sidetracked, but what I was going to say earlier is that someone phrased it to me that the defense industry doesn't cost a bajillion dollars a year. It requires a bajillion dollars a year. And so no matter, you see how easily Lockheed Martin put out a statement saying we're ready. As President Trump, we're ready to bomb. We're ready to go to war for you. That is not, I don't know what society we live in, and what you have to recognize about America is that we are so warlike. We are actually very warlike people. I had no idea. I just thought we all played football and we fought, and we don't like outsiders, I didn't realize that I was being trained to be a warrior for the hierarchy, the patriarchal hierarchy that I was getting integrated into. And so it goes to all of that, like I try to step back and see the superstructure for what it is and say, um, whether it's why these things are affecting us, what has been the root cause of all of our pain, because for a long time I was searching. I love reading, I love learning, and I was looking for a long time at what's been good. Is there some secret that we didn't know? Like, why isn't there peace? Why isn't there happiness? Why are we not building beautiful buildings? Why do our children not go to school in fresh air and sunlight? And
The
the answer
basics
is,
of life.
yeah, and the answer is just capitalism, right? The answer is just capitalism and profit motive seeking and settler colonialism and all of these things that continue to affect us. That continue, they're like, as I've kind of continued, like just unraveling all the things I was taught in my mind, it's been this journey of just accepting what I can, trying to move forward, and then using that and saying, I've been there. Look at me, and as an example of someone who drank the Kool-Aid because I was raised that way. And then I thought I was doing the right thing. And I realized at some point that I even was, I, as someone, and I think a lot of people feel, well, I'm doing all I can. What more do you want from me? Because it's hard. It's hard to say, yes, I will internalize that. It takes effort to say, yes, maybe I was incorrect about that. And so I think it's incumbent upon us now, as all veterans, if you have accepted your place in, American imperialism, that it's very important that you stand up and speak out and say, this is not who we are. Maybe June 6th, 1944, D-Day, we did it. We did a great job. Good job, everybody. Pat yourselves on the back. But we ain't that anymore. Like, since then we've invaded Vietnam, we genocided Korea, 20 years of war in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen. And that's just the overt stuff, and that's not
Yeah.
talking about meddling in people's elections and, and real politic and actually the things that we do that affect the material world for folks. And so if you're not willing to address that and take that on in Congress, then there's not going to be a real chance for change. You're not going to be able to affect the policy you need to. And that's why a lot of people get on to me and say, Austin, why are you always attacking the Democrats? And I feel like I'm not. I'm swinging for the fences at the Republicans, and these Democrats keep jumping in the way like, no, we'll save you, and I'm like, why? Why? Like, they do, and so, for example, even like my opponent, Sarah Elfreth, she doesn't actually want universal health care. Like, and I don't understand why. And I just like, I want to like, I'm like, explain it to me like I'm a child.
I can explain it in like a little simpler way is a lot of times it's the health insurance companies who pad their bank accounts to say like, no, you're not going to do this. But I also have a bigger conspiracy of it is that if everyone was provided healthcare, that means you have a lot of people who have more free time to advocate for themselves and more time to actually get involved civically. And I think overall, most elected officials would rather low voter turnout, low voter engagement, people not really being involved. Because once you get people involved, then you get more people supporting leftier candidates or people actually caring about the issues rather than just treating politics, unfortunately, like football. Like, this is my team, this is your team. Let's just fight it out.
Absolutely. And I think, any candidate will tell you the most difficult questions come from your local folks who show up, and they've been following this idea, they've been following this story since before you were born. And you're not going to have the perfect answer. And it is difficult, it is difficult to go in front of constituents and not know what they're going to ask you. And I think we can see that. Sarah Elfreth doesn't hold town hall. She holds town 3 questions and I'm gone, and that, because it's not easy. And when you don't have the answers that people want, you don't want to answer those questions. And like you said, we've made it about team sports because that's easier to control. That narrative is much easier to control if you allow anyone to vote. And I mean, Chuck Schumer does not want every Democrat to vote, like, so they have a vested interest in keeping the playing field just narrow enough so that they can keep that rotating villain strategy and just control the narrative just so, So absolutely, I think that having that representation there that actually is willing to get out and be wrong. I think the part of the people we live in a, a clip society now, right? So you get clipped, you're gonna get clipped. It's gonna have a bajillion views, and so no one wants to say I was wrong or I made a mistake. But I will say, like, I apologized online for voting for Kamala, and I know that that was not people were not
Wow.
happy about that because I think it was a mistake. I never again, in my policy at this point, and it's the policy of every leftist progressive I know, is that the centrists are going to once again try and run someone like Gavin Newsom, and I'm simply not doing it. If you want to earn the vote of the people, run someone the people will vote for. Release the autopsy or stop talking. We know why you lost. We know what happened. And it was simply, like you said, one of those things where if you say, like, we should have universal health care or we should stop a genocide, I don't like anyone that doesn't just say, I agree, needs to be checked out, right? Because there's no moral, you can equivalent your way out of it, or you can justify it any way you want. But for me, all I hear everything past we are committing a genocide is just dribble. And I think that that's weak. And I think that we need to stand against that and just say, no, we support universal healthcare. But again, it's their vested interest. Just like you said, the only thing that makes sense is that they have some kind of interest in not saying that. And I don't know how they sleep at night. I don't know how you can sit there and say, and what even gets me is that they sell out for so little, you know?
That's the thing. That's the thing. You
Isn't
look
that
at other
disappointing?
countries when they like how the US talks about other countries are so corrupt and look at their oligarchs and all that. I always say, yes, they are corrupt, but at least we can say they're being corrupt for like gold mansions and palaces and all that.
Yeah,
Other
yeah.
people get corrupt for like campaign money. I'm like something you can't even use on yourself. Like at least
An RV, bro.
an RV,
An
like that's
RV.
it.
I'm like,
A plane ride,
come
a
on, dude.
fancy dinner somewhere.
That's what,
And I'm like, this is the worst thing. So with that, let's kind of go. Well, before we go into the whole campaign finance of it all, I do want to get your thoughts on the genocide that is going on in Palestine, the annexation of the West Bank, but also talk about the broader. I even struggle to call it a war because it doesn't really feel like a war. It kind of feels like a hostile takeover. Are you someone who believes in a one state solution, two-state solution? What do you want to see at the end of all this?
I want to see what the Palestinian people want to see. So at first, I want to center their voices. But what I believe should happen is that we need a one-state solution. I no longer believe in a two-state solution. I think that is a J Street lie meant to funnel anger back into support for Israel. Israel is not only committing a genocide; they need to be sanctioned and they need to be held accountable for their crimes. Benjamin Netanyahu needs to see the Hague, and the people who have perpetrated these crimes need to be held accountable before the International Criminal Court. So the Palestinian people have a right to their land. The Nakba happened way before October 7th, and this occupation has been ongoing. Just to get it out there as soon as possible, I will not condemn Hamas. I'm
Can
going
you
to leave that
tell some
right
people
there.
why? Because a lot of people hearing that are going to say, "Oh my gosh, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to say I condemn Hamas." Where I'll give you my take first is that Hamas. I hate that we kind of talk about them as if they are this like terrorist organization. They are the official government of the
Absolutely.
Palestinian people in Gaza. So it is like we should talk about them as we talk about any other government. They're a government just like the Israeli has a government too. So we should
Absolutely.
talk about them in that way. But for your own self, can you kind of talk about why you do not condemn Hamas?
Yeah, absolutely. First, just like you said, Hamas is a governmental organization. Now, I think what they're thinking when they say Hamas is they're really saying, do you condemn the Al Qassam brigades, right? And my answer is still no, and I'll tell you why. I recognize that they're deemed a terrorist organization by the United States, and I fully accept that. That's fine. But I will not condemn a people who are resisting their murder. I will not condemn a people who are resisting their genocide. I don't care who it is. It's not about whether they're Palestinian or Israeli, whether they're Sudanese or Congolese. If you are resisting your own destruction, you have the full right and authority to do that. And further, if you look at what the composition of the Al Qassam brigades, mostly orphans from by Israel. So you're talking about an army of essentially orphaned children whose parents were murdered by the state of Israel, and you're asking me to condemn that. And I'm telling you right now, you can clutch your pearls all the way to hell, but I will not do it. I will stand up for these people who are fighting for themselves. I will condemn Israel for conducting terrorist attacks, for conducting terrorism against the West Bank, against the people of Gaza, against the people of southern Lebanon, against the people of Syria. When you brag about, I know a lot about terrorism, let me tell you. And when you put plastic explosives into pagers and put that into a civilian population and let them explode, that's terrorism. I find any United States politician that accepts a golden pager as a gift from anyone just the most disgusting thing that I think I've ever seen in my life. And that kind of, I don't know if it's like, when I was, I don't want to backtrack too much, but I was raised as a Southern Baptist, as a full Baptist in Oklahoma. You know what I mean? Like, and
Gotcha.
it took me some time. By the time I was in high school, I wasn't really involved. I was kind of like, I'm not sure about this. Um, but Zionism and is so prevalent even in like Southern American states, like the evangelical churches that I attended to, or the campuses or whatever they called them when they got smart, where you would have like special shops that just sold religious iconography and things like that, and there would be like everything was in Hebrew, and the Jewish people were set aside as this like special sect of Christianity. Like somehow they were like the original Christians in a way because of Judaism, but also people were pretty anti-Semitic too. They would actually say
Yeah.
things that were not, and so it was very confusing. And but we put this special like idea, and I don't know if our politicians have been, I don't know what's happened, why they have such loyalty to this state. But looking at it on the surface, you can just see that it's clearly wrong. And you see, videos of settlers beating Palestinians. And I mean, I watched the voice of Henry Job the other day, and I mean, I cried my eyes out. Like, we cannot account for this. This cannot. If I'm in a position of power to stop this, like Austin, what would you do? I would park the U.S. Abraham Lincoln 5 feet off the shore of Palestine and say, enough, enough. And so I would be someone. I support any state's right to exist that can exist peacefully with its neighbors, but I do not support the right of a genocidal apartheid state to exist in any form while it's conducting a genocide on its neighbors and unilaterally acting with aggression. So that's where I will be a vote against any kind of, until the day that the genocide stops, until the day that there is truth and reconciliation, that Palestinians are able to return to their land. Not another dime. Not another dime.
Thank you for that. No, no, that's amazing. And I think it's even more powerful for you to say that because you are a veteran. So you come from the military, and a lot of times we on the left, speaking broadly, we kind of look at veterans as like, okay, y'all are like too far gone, but
Sure.
you need veterans who are like able to call it out and speak to other veterans who may be maybe not too far gone, but gone a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
One kind of thing as we're closing out the military part is what are your thoughts on what's going on with Cuba, Venezuela, as we see right now the US is basically shut off like support that Cuba could be getting throughout the world. They're going through blackouts. We had actual brigades of basically humanitarians throughout the world go to Cuba delivering aid. Some people were actually arrested, like Chris Smalls, one of the
Yep. I saw him get
union
arrested.
leaders, things
Yeah.
like that. What are your thoughts on what's going on, and just
Well,
how would you kind of try to move forward?
yeah, I was very saddened to see Chris Smalls get arrested, because it seemed like no one else did, on the way back. So I was tracking all the influencers, Hassan and everybody else coming back and are doing their thing. Well, first of all, with Cuba, we should absolutely end the embargo today. We should end the embargo yesterday. There's no reason to embargo this nation. There's no reason to blockade this nation. We've been starving these people for 40, 50 years now for no reason whatsoever except Red Scare. The pervasive Red Scare continues to haunt America, and Republicans and Democrats have used that in order to justify this action against these. And so I would end the blockade. I would go so far. Same with anyone in our territorial waters. These should be. You said earlier about going, removing like Venezuela and Cuba, and it made me think about how we've changed from our soft power stance to a hard power stance, and how devastating that is for all of us. But it does illuminate the contradictions a little bit more in showing that whereas before Cuba was blockaded, we just weren't that aware of it. We weren't, but now we have people who are advocating for the destruction of a small island, and it's like, no, that's not who we are. That's not what anyone ever advocated for. Even my, the aunt and uncle still living out in Oklahoma somewhere who are certain that Che Guevara is still alive and still runs Cuba, or whatever, and Castro is still there. Even they say this is unnecessary, right? Why are we doing this to these people? And I, again, have never heard a justification for why we should be doing that. It's just we're punishing them the same way we punish Haiti for having the gall to stand up for themselves and having the gall to throw off their colonial chains. I believe that is why we punish Cuba. And with Venezuela, I think, is the clearest example of foreign policy failure, where this is the act of a nation that does not have the requisite authority anymore to be able to pass off its violence as justice. Instead of being able to say, well, the Venezuelan people were under duress and we helped them and now they're liberated, we simply say, no, we're just we're capturing their leader, killing his guard and taking them out. We own your stuff now. But that degrades our power. That shows that we are that paper tiger, that we can do some things. But why did we have to do that? We had to do that because Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, and China is beating us to Sunday with every single piece of renewable energy. And so now we're stuck in the situation where we actually have to run foreign wars of aggression to fulfill our need for hydrocarbons. So instead of changing our trajectory early on, like China was forced to do, we simply refused to do it and said, we'll just, take over someone else's oil. At some point, like you see with Iran right now, we're getting a bloody nose, right? We're getting a bloody nose. We're having to take a step back. I don't even know what we're negotiating anymore. It's like, no, you closed the street. No, I closed it. No, I closed it first. Like, I don't even understand what, it was clear to everyone that they had no justification. They had no clear incentive in the beginning, but now we just have to do it because we are beholden to the state of Israel, who funds or has compromise on our politicians or something, to which they feel compelled that we must go out and actually spend blood and treasure for this folly, right? It doesn't. I don't. There are lots of people that I talk to every single day, deep within the intelligence community, who are like, "What are we doing? What are we doing?"
Wow.
They're yeah. No, and there are certainly people that are like, who have said, no, that's fine. They're gonna get a nuclear weapon. Oh, okay, sure, fine. But a lot of folks, especially the intelligence, is a little bit different. We're supposed to be the ones who know better, and that's something that you know intelligence was always interesting to me because I wanted to be the one that was in the room when the decision was made. I wanted to be there to say, we have a moral compass, we have a bedrock of principles, we can make the right decisions. And what is true is that all of those facts are still known, but now we don't have anyone in place to stop Trump. We don't have anyone in place who will actually be a voice of reason, or if they are, they're immediately removed by Pete Hegseth. So all of that is to say that there is no justification for war with Iran. I want peace with Iran. I want us to have strategic partnerships with Iran. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Show me a country in the world and tell me why we shouldn't have a partnership with them. Like
Exactly.
I look forward to your submissions and why we shouldn't, because I don't think that that's the case. I think it's past time we live in a world of peace. China is beating us. If you want national security, China is beating us in every department, including with their Belt and Road Initiative, which are, again, giving low cost loans to the African nations, where when America comes in, the IMF and the World Bank, we impose austerity, right? And we have these high interest rates, and you have to give your resources over to BP. Whereas China is saying, here's a low interest rate, and we're building your roads for you, because they understand that they're trying to open up the international market, right? They're trade, I want to say trade maxing. They're trade maxing, right? But they're really doing their thing. But we don't have the foresight as a nation to say, well, we should be doing this. Why aren't we competing in that same market? If you're such a capitalist, why are you not competing in this market instead of trying to bomb the third world?
No, you're definitely right. And kind of final thoughts with this is that it's scary that the intelligence community is looking at this saying, what are we doing? Because to a point, it starts to feel as if our countries, and not really country, but the politicians' beholdenness to Israel is like, it feels like it's attached to the campaign finance of it all, but then it also feels like it's something deeper than that too, because even before APAC was even discussed, they were still beholden to this country. It's just been ignoring, which is just insane. So it's definitely like a breath of fresh air that you can call it out and feel free to call it out too, and not one of these kind of scared politicians. Because even the sad thing here in Maryland, seeing people challenge current incumbents or challenge people, how many people are scared to talk about it, who feel like, oh, maybe I can just run as like left on everything but this,
Yeah.
which I think is really a destructive thing. It kind of shows where people's morals are. But as we kind of change topics here, let's talk about immigration because you mentioned getting ICE out. So definitely want to hear more your thoughts on that. But I kind of want to talk about real quick is how the conversation around ICE has changed. And me as a black person, I kind of feel like the conversation of ICE is taking a weird turn because you hear people talk about how, oh my gosh, ICE killing people in the streets is wrong, but then or Chuck Schumer said it once, which another horrible person, but Chuck Schumer said that ICE officers need to be trained like our police officers are. But I look at that and say police officers kill more people than ICE. So where do you kind of see that dynamic of how ICE is acting, police is acting, but overall just our kind of our system of authoritarianism towards our own people?
Yeah, I am devastated. I drive to work every day down 70, right? And 20 and 32. I've seen more cops now than I've seen in so many years. And I essentially feel like we live in a police state at this point. Someone said it to me, it hurt me deeply, and I knew it was true. That right now, white people are feeling the effects of police like black people have been feeling the effects of police for a long time. And I think there's a certain truth to that, that it is more visible to your average white voter now in the suburb who's upset about it. And first of all, immigration, I just want to say this first, we love our immigrants. Second, immigrants make America strong and we want more of it. The next part is I was so disappointed that Kamala and the Democrats ran with the lie that we were being invaded. And the reason that that lie worked is because there was some truth to it, not that we were being invaded by this horde. One of the things that you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to say that we haven't discussed, is that let's not just discount racism and Islamophobia and all this too, as that ramped up. But I think for a lot of people, they saw that the illegal immigration numbers were climbing, and then there was a convenient lie to sell all this to them, and so they just ate it up, and then Democrats tried to run on it. But the truth is, there was a surge in immigration from 2022 to 2024 during COVID, right? So we had a push-pull effect on immigration that happened at the time where four nations were undergoing terrible economic hardship: Haiti, Venezuela. I'm going to forget the other two right now. I'll say Argentina, but I'll come back to it. And then on the our side, we had the Great Resignation, we had people dying from COVID, and we had people retiring. And so you look at the numbers, and they do spike up. They do absolutely spike up for 2 years or so. And then afterwards, when COVID dies down, people return to work, the numbers return back to normal. So did we have a bump? Yes. Did it return back to normal? Absolutely. But when I saw Democrats running and saying we should build a border wall and we need to militarize the CBP and we need to have ICE enforcement, and Obama increased ICE. Like Joe Biden increased the budget. Like I watched them increase the budget, and it caused me a certain level of discomfort at the time. But being a liberal, I was like, oh well, it must be
Democrats doing it.
like I guess that's So and now I just say they're just as bad. Like I have to look at it and say the material reality here is that it was bad then, it's bad now. Immigration is a paperwork issue. It doesn't need to be a militarized enforcement issue. The programs to encourage people to come to courts have like a 96% success rate. People want to be legally documented. No one wants to be hiding in the shadows. No one wants to go to the store wondering if ICE is going to pick them up. I see people working all the time, and I think, what must it be like to go to your job every day and wonder if today is the day you're going to CCOP? And I'm just livid that we live in a society where some portion of the American public has deemed that is okay. And I was speaking to people actually in Frederick, Maryland Saturday evening on the street, handing out some pamphlets and stuff and just talking to them about their district and someone who's running there. And you still have people who are buying, I would say, let's abolish ICE. And they'll say, well, we can't. Because the immigrants, they'll come in, they'll say, well, the previous immigrants had to work really hard, but now these new ones aren't. And I think that's just racism, one. And two, no one is ever saying that we shouldn't have a proper enforcement system, but we should also just have a proper immigration system. If it takes 10 years to get through the immigration process, that's not an immigration system. That's a system that wants you to come here illegally to work for nothing for corporations who benefit from that. I mean, it's never been clear to me why we're not holding corporations responsible who hire undocumented immigrants. I'm wondering
Exactly.
when that answer is coming from someone. And I've realized now that it's just not. And so that's why Austin, why are you running? Because of all of this. Because of all of this. Because if you don't have, and it's like you said, you could be good on a lot of things, but if you're bad on something like Israel, if you're bad on something like healthcare, it speaks to where your heart's at. It speaks to what you really care about. Because these are things that benefit other people that might not benefit me, you know? Like these are things that I want for the next generation. And I think I want to live in a society where strong guys are gentle guys. We take care of one another and we love one another and we don't tolerate like I'm, you know, I'm not tolerating, I'm not saying trans people or black people. That's we. It's we. You know, like I'm done. I am done pretending like we're not a family. I'm done. It's like everyone's saying, well, why is the left defending Hassan? Because we're all done pretending that we don't like this. We're done pretending that you get to decide what's good for us and what we can like and what we can't like and who we're going to love and who we're going to protect and what we're going to defend. So if you have garbage policies, I'm going to call them out. I'm not beholden to Chuck Schumer. You know, I like I live in a little townhouse. I like it. You know, I like my little cozy space. I don't need to live in the governor's mansion. I can't be blackmailed. Like you could tell me I'm cringe. I'm a millennial. I was born cringe, you know, like that's my birthright. So what do you got? You know, and I think that's the benefit of running as a progressive. That's the benefit of running as someone who actually cares about it, is that we can go after him, you know, because even if someone said to me the other day, like, well, you're not going to get elected. And you're going to fail. And I thought to myself, it's so beautiful. I could literally die and socialism is still going to win. You know what I mean? Like, because we have an idea, because we are more than the sum of our parts, right? Like, each of us, like, and that's why I believe that politicians should not be celebrities. They should be vessels for policy. And that's it. Like, either put the policy in the bag, little bro. Like either vote for the way you're supposed to be voting or vote them out because I don't have any time. Like my daughter doesn't know Chuck Schumer, doesn't care, you know, but she does know that they won't vote for they won't codify Roe. All right. You had a supermajority, you didn't codify Roe. And so we're done. I'm sorry, this conversation's over. Get them out, pack the court, pack it all. We're done. And then like, so there's the other thing is there's no amount of like parliamentarian hijinks that I will not get up to make Republicans' lives miserable. Like, why are we not fighting back? Why are we not making their lives absolutely terrible? Like, Kash Patel wants to take his girlfriend on a plane trip to Las Vegas or whatever. Requisition the fuel. Not today, my guy. You know what I mean? Like, we know what these people do for a living. We can hold quorum calls. We can make them read the bills. We can make them stand on the floor and make their lives uncomfortable. Yeah, the problem is we've got a party in there currently that's not willing to be uncomfortable. We have the party, the leadership and the Democrats that are not willing to upset that status quo because I don't even want to talk about Chuck Schumer's latest video that, you know, like, and about Palestinians not believing the Torah. Like, okay, I just have to take a deep breath, you know, and be like, we obviously have people that are literally insane and they need to be removed from power before they kill us all. And so that's why whether it's Democrat, Republican, you know, if you're essentially a neocon who is not invested in the people of the United States or is invested in war against others for religious reasons of some kind, I'm a secular man, but I welcome all religions in our country. Everyone's welcome here, but we do not go to war over religion and things like that. That's not something that America does. Like we're a progressive society of people who care about one another and want to take care of our world. I was there. We got rid of CFCs. All right. Millennials did that. There was a hole in the ozone. We closed it. Okay. And then what happened? Everything went to heck. But it can be better and people will care about that. You know, we can have a society that cares about our earth and takes care of one another and looks at how we treat one another, right? And not just says it. I'm so sick of Democrats telling people they care about minorities. I'm sick of them telling me about they care about black people, that they care about Asian
until
people.
the election's over.
Until
and
the
then after that, we
election's
go
over.
back to not caring.
But it's just they never like they'll pander, but why don't you go on record and say what I like to say? I tweeted this because it was fire. But the only thing that Hillary Clinton should have pulled out of that purse is reparations. You know what I mean? Instead of trying to pander and say, well, I'm like this, here's some, it's just racism is really what it is. And it's just white chauvinism, right? It's just white, like, oh, well, don't worry, we'll take care of you. And, you know, I know we're kind of veering into race now, but I love it because
I'm glad you're talking about this. Yeah.
No, I think that America, you know, the more I have invested myself into the idea of America and especially living here, there is no America without black people. The idea of America doesn't exist without our original sin of slavery and the you know, the dichotomy of saying you want a new society while using the blood of others to enact that. We've never recovered from that, and that's there's not and when I say recovery, I mean people oftentimes don't address how intertwined that still is. When we talk about systemic racism is just part, I mean, that's just like we're talking about surface level, right? Our whole society is built on this, right? And everything we do touches it. And it's the same way I tell some of my friends will say like, well, what do we do? Like we work for this company or that company. And it's like, I know it's hard because everything we touch is covered in blood. Everything in America, we started on genocide. Manifest Destiny was just genocide. And I think about that picture with the skulls every time, the buffalo skulls, and the guy standing next to it. As someone who grew up in Oklahoma, the native experience and the indigenous experience was really strong. And, the Trail of Tears was still talked about as if it happened just, a few generations ago, because it was just a few generations ago. And so the idea that, we can disconnect ourselves from this, I believe a lot in class, and I believe in intersectionality in such that we have to recognize that class affects minorities. The violence of the state affects minorities in a much different way. And so being cognizant of that, but all of this is, it's all connected one big piece. And I think that's what, if I could tell anyone anything, is that it's capitalism, it's patriarchy, it's colonialism. Step back and you see the full picture for what America has been and what it could be. We can't dismantle this unless we say we're going to have truth and reconciliation. We can't dismantle this structure unless we say we recognize this is the case. We recognize that there is systemic racism. We recognize that there are endemic problems of poverty within all subclasses, right? And so, but no one is willing to address this. No one is. And again, if a Democrat wants to support Black people, $25 minimum wage, because you know what? That supports white people too. Again, universality and all of these things is what matters. Like, why are we not? The working class is all of us. The working class bridges all of these boundaries. And so why are they not advocating for that? Why are they
No,
refusing?
no, you're exactly right. And it's one. I'm so glad that you kind of segued there to it without me doing it. But like, I'm glad that you mentioned. So I do just want to kind of like real quick nail this down. Are you a supporter of reparations?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful, wonderful. Because you're right. It's a lot of people who talk about, oh, we support black people. The one thing I always hate is that when politicians talk about black people, the only thing they talk about is voting rights and the legal justice system, and that's it. As if we do not face the same economic crisis that everyone else faces. Like when it comes to home, people having homes, we don't face the same problems. Housing, all this different stuff. As we segue into some different, actually, now that we're kind of in the conversation about the whole Democratic Party, I kind of have had a question since we started, kind of around you talk a lot about the Republican Party being awful, and also centrist Democrats being awful too, which in my mind makes up the majority of politicians who are Democrats. Do you think the Democratic Party can actually be reformed or changed, or do you think we're going to need an outside party? Because you look at Kamala Harris's presidential run, even some of the kind of left wing things that she ran on in 2020, she changed on. The Democratic Party has kind of turned their back on the trans community. The Democratic Party has kind of ostracized black men to say that this is your fault. Immigration has changed. Healthcare. Democratic Party really doesn't even talk about universal healthcare now. They really only talk about a public option under Biden. Who have the cancellation of student loans isn't even brought up now. Some of the most basic things that kind of Bernie Sanders established, we no longer talk about it. Do you think there is even a way to, or also before that, we even saw when progressives, democratic socialists, the squad, however you want to call them, had a slim majority in the House, that they could have forced a vote to at least started to get whether that was a universal healthcare vote, get a key seats on different committees, actually wield some power. We saw the actual left say no, but then 2 years later, the Republicans did it and got out of that. A new speaker, committee seats, changed their whole game. And then the big thing that OC said to that is, oh, if we did that, we would lose so much power within the Democratic Party, and we would be out of favor. When you can look at the party, doesn't even favor them at all. Do you think the party can actually be changed?
I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know. And so I think that there is such corruption within the Democratic Party right now. I have to work just to be perfectly real, I have to work within the context of the battlefield I'm given. And I do not believe a third party is viable right now, because it would be if AOC or Bernie, whom I both support and love, would break off and start that third party. But I think you'd have to have that kind of momentum. I don't think just someone just starting a third party who was, who didn't have any name recognition, I don't think would be a viable strategy. But as we've seen in the UK, this has happened before, right? The Greens broke off saying, okay, fine, then we'll just go do our own thing. And now they're the most popular party there, right? They're surging. And that's what will happen here. And what the issue is, whether the Democrats are either going to splinter, and we're going to, they will splinter off and the old guard will have to leave. So I'm coming at this as people keep calling me the Democratic Tea Party, right? It's sort of like that, I guess, right? But we are you know, I've done my reading, so I prefer a vanguard term, but so like we're
I like that.
if we're the vanguard into the Democratic Party to say, and it is essentially entryism, right? We're entryists to say we are, because the Democratic Party is whatever we say it is. The Democratic Party is whatever I say it is. It is, if I run as a Democrat and I say I'm a Democrat and my policies are Democratic. So the idea that what Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and Cory Booker think are the Democratic morals and values, that's just what they think. That's not what I think, and that's not what the people of America think. So, and right now, the disparity between what the media and the DNC wants us to like and what the American people actually, excuse me, actually want and like is very different. So, either they can get on board or they will be forced out. But either way, we're either going to have a ship of Theseus Democratic Party where we just replace them individually, or we will have it all at once if they want to fight about it. But what I think the most important thing to let them know is that we are willing, ready, looking forward to the fight. We know you're going to fight. We know you're going to kick and scream. We know you're going to call us anti-Semitic. We know you're going to call us fascists. We know you don't know what that term means, and we don't care. We're not asking for your permission, and we're running anyway. So you can gnash your teeth and cry all you want, but here we are, and we're voting, and we're giving people universal health care, and we're giving people free school lunches, and we're going to take care of Americans, and we're stopping aid to Israel. Because it's wild to me we don't have high-speed rail. Again, one of these things that are just so simple and so straightforward, and everyone's for it. But we don't have the other portion of it is we don't really have labor militancy in America either. You know, Unions have been essentially gutted, and
Or
now
co-opted.
exactly, and overtaken. Now you've got the rank and file are typically somewhat progressive, but what I didn't realize running, this was on me, I learned a valuable lesson. Union leadership is wildly moderate, and they are very corporate
Yeah.
based, and you're not getting any kind of help from there. But we have to build that social consciousness up in America. We've got to we have to build a socialist society before we're going to get a society that looks socialist. We have to build socialist people, right? We have to come at it from a new angle and say, these are the values that we care about. I don't care about waging war in Iran. I care about having schools and people taken care of. And I want every person to be loved and feel loved. And so we've also realized that we're never going to get that by asking. We're never going to, because like you said, as soon as they find it convenient, they ditch those, like, and I would even say that I don't think Kamala ran very left at all. I think she kind of started middle and ran right. We get the pundits also say like, oh, she supported trans people or she ran too far to the left. And I'm like, she was talking
Where?
about the most lethal military and transnational border gangs and all this. And I was like, what Democratic Party is this? And so I have seen personally just the slide to the right. And, I would love to have a Democratic Party that's all united against our fight against the right, but that's just not the system that the right has set up. Is that they've taken over part of the Democratic Party as well. And so we've got to root that out before we can really do much against them, because we'll keep fighting the right. We know they're wrong. We know their policies are hurtful and harmful, but when you have people that are actively blocking and, these ops like Mallory McMorrow, like people actively trying to take away votes from the progressive candidates who support the will of the people, this is something that we've got to root out from the party, root and stem. And I think Zionism and the Israel lobby speaks a lot to that. I think that it's going to go a long way. And it's like anything. It's like I say with like gun control. Let's see how we do when everyone's fed and housed, and healthy and happy and don't live in broken homes. And because let's try that first. And instead of letting them tell us that that's not possible, instead of them telling us that we have to have war and we have to, we can't pay for one another, we can't pay for people to go to college. And how do we expect to win against any of these people if winning is your goal, but you're not willing to build? I mean, because society builds people, right? Society makes these. We produce engineers, we produce doctors and scientists and lawyers and all of these things that can help us, but we're so far past that. we're willing to sacrifice whole divisions of our economic industrial class to satisfy the whims of a few billionaires. We're not, we're not secure. It's actually very insecure. And I feel, and maybe that's, someone who's further to the left of me could be like, there's your conservatism creeping up, where I'm like, I feel insecure, right? Where I feel threatened just by how sketchy everything is, how shaky all of our systems are being tested. And we've got to have people to stand up to it and say, we're not voting for this and we're going to hold you accountable. It's not just that. And here's what I'd say about AOC. I love AOC. She says things sometimes I'm like, why are you saying this? You know, like any friend, I would counsel her to, I think she has some good political instincts and some missteps, right? And I think that her
Mhm.
her team gives her that advice, and I think she fights back too. She does not like being called out, and nobody
No.
does. But you know what? I'll hold her accountable too. You know what? Because I don't think that no one is above reproach, and I would ask my friends the same way that I ask them to tell me when I've made a mistake. I would ask that the same of my peers in Congress. Like, I can't wait to get in there and like, Ro, I love what you're doing, but what's up with this crypto stuff? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, come on. So, like, these are conversations, but we can hold them accountable and say, all right. And I think
Okay.
we've got that. We've got a beachhead. The squad has allowed progressives to have a small hold in Congress. I want to vote with Summer Lee 100% of the time. I want to be Ilhan Omar's top guy. Like, I want to be I want to be with them there too, but we're rolling in the tanks. You know what I mean? Like, we're not coming in to say, "Oh, we're going to hold space and we're going to do bodies and spaces." We're no more. You will not find me interpretive dancing outside of the Kennedy Center. I am going to be holding these people accountable and making their lives miserable on the floor, and holding up every single bill and holding up every single appropriation and every single judge and every appointment and everything that we could be doing and we should be doing. I was actually thinking the other day that I need to have someone on my staff called like the parliamentary, or like the parliamentary, like, black wizard, or some like battle mage, right? Like, someone whose sole job is to just figure out what are the ways in which we can make their lives difficult if they will not acquiesce to our demands, right? Because why are we allowing them? My daughter's not getting any younger, and I do not want her to grow up in a world where she could be assaulted and then her accuser gets let off. I'm sorry, but I'm ready to bring in the new woke era. I'm a feminist, I'm a veteran, and y'all are all in trouble because we're taking care of people. You know what I mean? Like, we care for each
There we
other,
go.
and we're standing up. And I just think we're gonna fight. And like, we know a fight's coming. And I think people have been rallying around us because we need fighters. And it's not just me. There's Ethan, there's Jakea, there's all sorts of people running in Maryland who are fighters, who are progressives, who are ready to do this, but they're not getting any support from the DNC. We're obviously getting nothing but other stuff. And without airing out all the strategies, it's a dogfight. It's a knife fight in a phone booth to try and get past these primaries, because the establishment does not want progressive people coming in here saying that, yes, we actually do want universal health care. Because again, we can't have, well, we actually can have universal health care and war with Iran, but I will say it differently. I will say we don't need one and we desperately need the other.
Yeah. I mean, the way capitalism looks at it, all the military contractors look at it. If we have universal health care, that takes money away from
Yeah,
us. But then also, I've always said one of the biggest reasons that we do not have universal free college or universal health care is because the military doesn't want that. If most people did not need to rely on the military to take care of their basic needs, a lot of people wouldn't go into the military. If I could go to college for free and not have to pay for it, I don't need to go possibly die in a war that isn't profiting me or isn't even helping keep our country safe. I would just go to college. I would just get healthcare.
absolutely.
But with that, two to three more questions here is one, you did a lot about kind of fighting back against your party, the Republicans, all that. Would a Austin Dykes in Congress vote for Hakeem Jeffries? Okay. Oh wow. Okay, that was a fast answer. There wasn't even a okay. It is a podcast that I did with a candidate running for Congress. I will not name this person because I actually didn't air the podcast because it just went kind of weirdly. Who gave me like a run? They're supposed to be like a progressive candidate, and they gave me a run around like, well, I need to have a conversation with them, and
Mm.
then we need to talk. And I'm always thinking like, Hakeem Jeffries does not care about having a conversation with you when you get into Congress to get your vote. It's either you're going to support me or you're not.
And that's the way that we have as progressives. What I would say is we need to start playing the same game. Hakeem doesn't do anything for free. He's going to smile on camera, but these are killers. right? These are cutthroats. We're politicians, right? Don't get it twisted. And like the idea that, like, again, it might show that this person, thankfully, we don't want to lead them to the slaughter. Like if they don't understand what they're walking into, then maybe it's for the best. But the idea that you shouldn't have these stances, or you trade political capital in exchange for other things, and you can hold people accountable for that to get what you want. That's what politics is about. But what Democrats have done, and what the people in Congress now, they pre-negotiate, right? This, like you said, they say, well, I'll have to have a conversation. What's there to have a conversation about? Have you not been following politics? Have you not know where he stands?
Exactly.
And I think, my therapist, God bless her, says, when people tell you who they are, believe them. And so when you see, and so I don't, most of the time, I don't even really look at what, I mean, I monitor the situation constantly. So I'm always seeing what people put out. But I look at what's a spreadsheet called the Democrat Left Tracker, and I just look at where exactly they have voted. It's a great spreadsheet. I think if you Google it, you'll go to it's like a Reddit post, and it has every single vote listed, what they care about, or what they actually vote for, has them ranked, right? And so
Wow.
for me, that helps me make decisions about who I want to support. Like, for example, and I'll just lay it out plainly, like
Mhm.
AOC, I think, is the like something like seventh or eighth best voting Democrat. Ro Khanna is like 2 above her, or 1% above
Wow.
her. And so really it's a math question, right? So if we're gonna run AOC for president, people are like, oh, Ro run or AOC run. Okay. If someone has this much popularity and they vote with us 97% of the time, I think that's pretty good. Whereas if someone like Sarah Elfreth, she votes, 47% of the time with the Republicans.
Whoa.
She voted to thank, Charlie voted to thank ICE. She voted to honor the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk, like,
My gosh.
and to me, when I see that, I'm thinking, you're not even willing to say Charlie Kirk was a bigot. Like, if you're not willing to say Charlie, that we don't support Charlie Kirk and you guys are all nuts, like get over it.
So
Like,
what are we doing
not
here?
that anyone supports political violence, but to say what the administration has tried to do with this has been completely outrageous. And so when you have someone who's willing to support that, why are we allowing people to give them these little, to just ease out our rights, just to kind of continue this backslide into authoritarianism and fascism, where we don't have the actual rights? I mean, there's National Guard troops in DC right now, and everyone's acting like it's normal. Like, has ICE left the airports yet? Haven't heard
No,
about that
not
in a
at all.
little while, but I'm guessing
Yeah,
not.
right. No one's talking about it. I recently had to go on a work trip. They're still walking around like it's nothing,
Yeah.
talking to people as if it's so weird in the United States that the biggest things can happen as if ICE just being out day to day, and people just start seeing it as like a normal thing. You give it a few weeks, people normalize it. Where, to me personally, I don't know if having a Democratic president come back, if we're going to see a scale back of ICE, or is it going to be, hey, ICE is already like this, let's just go ahead and keep it? Because a lot of times we see when Democrats get in office, they don't normally set things back to even where they used to be. They just kind of put this as like, this is the new status quo. And we just will try. I won't even say try our best not to make it worse. We won't be blatant with making it worse. We'll do it undercover. But I kind of do want to segue into two last topics. One is probably a real quick one. Do you support the release of the Epstein files? But also, do you support the actual like wealthy billionaires, millionaires who are in it also being brought to justice as well?
There should be public show trials. Like, these people, they have no idea how much we are going to, like, not only that, we're going to open up we're going to open up the files. We're going to open up the banks, right? Because all of this has a connection. The fact that, I want to see who's connected to all of this financial power, all of these levers. If there's someone that's profiting, whether it's in the Epstein files or whether it's trading stocks on Palantir, or if you're profiting off death and misery, I want to know about it, and you are gone. And I'm telling you, like, my goal as a leftist is to build power. And my goal is to build and use that power. One of the things that I am not going to do is hold my power back and say, "Oh, well, we got to wait for the right time." We are going to use it. We're going to use it viciously. We're going to enact our agenda ruthlessly. And part of that will be holding all of those billionaires are going to throw up every roadblock over in the sun to try and stop that stuff from coming out, including buying our politicians. I mean, the fact that Pam Bonding was watching what, congressional people were looking at in order to hold it against him later. Why isn't crime should be held up? Like, judges and lawyers need to start filing criminal charges against these people yesterday. And so I believe women, believe Me Too still exists for me, right? Like, we We believe women, we take care of those that we love, and that includes holding men accountable. I don't care how rich and powerful you are. If you've hurt someone, if you've abused others, like you should go to prison.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I know I said last too, but you actually make me think about things too. So no, this is definitely a great conversation. One is kind of about AI and surveillance. As someone who's worked in the intelligence community for foreign affairs, what are your thoughts on currently how we see groups like Palantir, these big massive companies come in and kind of buying up these surveillance state and really turning, I hate to say turning the US into a surveillance state, because we think back to, as you were talking about, the CIA was hacking people's phones with the Patriot Act. So where do you see things as far as AI surveillance state is concerned?
I think we're in a very critical juncture that we have to address AI and data centers immediately. So for me, as far as the surveillance portion of it goes, we are actually in a crisis. We are sliding further and further into a police state where, like you said earlier, not only do we have the police everywhere, but now we've got surveillance technology that is monitoring everyone. So I'm a big tech dude. I've seen it. I've used AI before, and it's very, very powerful. How I feel about AI in general is that it's a tool. And what we have to do is we have to regulate it. Like any other tool, utility, we can't allow it to just to be used and raise our energy prices and destroy our environment. But that's the environmental portion of it. The surveillance portion of it is I want every flock camera destroyed. I want Palantir dismantled piece by piece, and Alex Karp should be sent to CCOT. Like this is a war criminal. So these people like Palmer Luckey and Enduro and Peter Thiel and everyone's who, again, these people who are profiting, what they've decided in their mind is that they can't see the end of capitalism, but they can see the end of America. And so what they've decided in their mind is they're going to take over these techno-feudal states that once we balkanize and everything, falls apart, that they will control. And they've said it plainly before. Peter Thiel said, if you can't control them through voting, we need to control them through other means, right? And AI is another tool by doing that. So what's happening now is that it's not just a new unique novel to approach things, but it's also being used to surveil us, to monitor us, to tailor everything to us. And so that one of the more dangerous things is that we can't let the internet like tailor our world, shape our world for us. It atomizes us in such a way that we're all sitting in our apartments already. We're all disparate, right? We're all kind of out there in the world, not building the communities that we need to build. And AI is just another one of those problems where it surveils us, it burns up our resources, all for the benefit of a few shareholders and corporations and the defense industry that gets some sort of benefit from it. But for me, I would dismantle all of this stuff. We need to have protections for United States citizens that says, just because you don't have an expectation of privacy while you're out in public doesn't mean that you can track my face. And that's one of the things that people are so I've been hearing a lot online, like, well, why aren't there more protests? Why you don't see as many Palestinian protests anymore? And first of all, you do if you go to where they are. But secondly, anyone who has decided not to show up, can you blame them? They can track you from your house to the protest. They can track everything that's on your phone when you get there. I'm telling you right now, don't take your phone to a protest. Okay, folks? Right? Or if you do, get rid of Face ID entirely. But that's my digital forensic side. They're tracking all of this to such a degree, and not just the government, but Facebook, Meta, Google, all of these companies that are now allowed to track that they
And they get government contracts.
making the government incentivizes them to track because the government then gets to use that data to surveil you. So it's this again. What is I think of the description of cap or fascism in some way. The merging of the corporate and government state where they are the same thing now. So yeah, to your point, I'm devastated that we live in a surveillance world now and I would say that I like to say that China is doing a lot of good things. I would say the same thing about their surveillance state. I would say the exact same thing, that I want Americans to be free. I want us to feel like a free people. I want us to be strong in our beliefs. And what you see with things like free speech is that as a nation becomes more under duress from economic instability or stability from the world, that starts to get clamped down on. And you can see that happening in the United States. I believe that the freedom of speech is really, for me, one of our number one things. I think it is maybe the thing. Because if you go anywhere else, you go to Great Britain or somewhere, Great Britain, you go to England or whatever. Sorry, it's 2026. I'm old. If you go to England, you can't say free Palestine. You can't say from the river to the sea or you get arrested. And for me, that is anathema to being an American citizen who considers themselves free. that we do have the right and the ability to speak our mind so long as it doesn't hurt anyone else, right? It's not hate speech or something, but to simply advocate for your point and then to be arrested or thrown, to be surveilled, followed, bullied by the police, these are all chilling effects on our democracy, which if we don't fight back, we're just going to keep sliding and keep sliding. And like you said, people get normalized ICE in the airport, they'll normalize the National Guard, they'll normalize checkpoints, they'll I just have to give my ID. Oh, it's no big deal. I just got to give my ID. And that's I don't know, like, who was the Band of Brothers and Easy Day? Those boys are rolling in their graves, like we fought against this. We fought for this. And so I would say to all my more conservative friends out there, you don't like this. Grandpappy didn't raise you to be no bootlicker. You know what I mean? Like, what is this? We used to fight
You're right.
cops. Remember the Battle of Blair Mountain? Like, we used to take care of one another. But now something else has happened to where we're all so scared and so kept on the ropes all the time with economic instability. We feel like we can't fight back. We're all tired and we're scared of our neighbors. And, it just breeds this continual division and strife that we can't get past. And so we've got to break through that. We've got to break through the cycle and say, enough is enough with the corporations, enough, get the money out of our government, get the foreign influence out. Let's do what's right for the American people, whether you're Republican, Democrat, brother, everybody's getting healthcare. I don't care if you're the most racist bigot I've ever seen. Your kids are getting free healthcare. They're going to learn how to read and they're going to go to a good school. And that's it. You know what I mean?
And through society taking care of you, hopefully we can make people a lot less racist, a lot less bigoted, a lot less horrible. And I think a lot of people would be, because then it's like, well, I can't blame my neighbors for why I don't have X, Y, and Z, because I have X, Y, and Z. So it's not something I have to hate you for.
Yeah, exactly. And my neighbors take care of me. My neighbors
Exactly.
have what I have. We don't, and I building that community. And I think that's just like we said, we're never going to have a socialist society if we don't build socialist people. And that means advocating for being good to one another. It means advocating for things that take. So when your politicians say, I want, things to be more affordable, we've got to say, so make it more affordable by giving us $25 an hour minimum wage, or make it more affordable by capping prices at the grocery store. Right. Instead of telling me you can't do that because socialism or something, like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, do something.
Well, that's an old line for me. That's an old line,
It's
blaming
old. It's
socialism,
old. It's old and
Marxism,
busted.
capitalism, all that.
It's the we are still the most propagandized people on earth. I mean, I
Yeah.
grew up and I just think about it now how, my God, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about, socialism. I didn't know anything. I didn't even know about our own history. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't know who that was. I knew some version of him that did not exist. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
No, you're right.
and that's the truth. All these people often ask me, Austin, like, I don't know, you talk a lot about race and stuff. And I live in a place that has a lot of race issues, like, but
Mhm.
one of the things that I've found is that when I keep going, well, we got one. That's not true. We got one. John Brown was a good one. But the go back and look at our revolutionary history in the United States, and you know who's been doing it? Black people, and specifically black women. And you know what I mean? Like, I look at
Black
that.
women have carried revolutions, the movement on their backs, even though a lot of people hype up, and rightfully so, the Malcolm X's, the Martin Luther Kings, the all the civil rights heroes and stuff, the John Lewis's. It was a lot of black women in the background doing a lot of this work.
I think about, the Chicago Free Food Pantry, right? And
Mm,
Black Panthers, they can go out and hold their guns and stuff, but someone's at home making that food, and someone's at home getting up and making schedules and doing all the hard, dirty work. And that's something that, as a DSA member, we talk about this. Like, you want to, like, be revolutionary or whatever, but sure, you can do that fun stuff. But can you sit in a meeting for 45 minutes with no agenda?
yep.
Can you do the hard, with people that you might not even like, right? People that you might not even, like, really care for, but you're all working together. But I think that's what we look back at history and we say, I wasn't taught that history. I wasn't taught that these were revolutionary heroes, because that would be dangerous, because that would tell me that they were actually fighting for my rights. And so what I realized later on is that my people are oppressed, all of us, in the same, like, I can be part of the same revolutionary struggle that they were a part of. And, I look back at all the things that I was told about welfare queens, and it makes me so mad. You know what I mean? Like, let's talk about real racism. Let's talk about casual racism in the United States. All the things that I was casually told that, that were racist, and I look back on it now and I think, do you know why, like, I want to talk about this. Black joy. White people are so afraid of black joy. And I was afraid for a long time too, because what do you do with it? I was taught that we're all stoic. We keep our emotions bottled up inside and we don't ask for help. We're all cowboys. And, you don't ask you take care of your neighbor, but you don't ask for help from your neighbor, because that would make you less than or
Mm,
something. And I look at all of the, in the Black community, I see community and I see people taking care of each other because they have had to do that, because they've lived under a system, duh, for so long, which is violent, in which the violence towards them has been exacerbated to where they have formed communities, they've formed organizations that take care of it. So now white America is standing around saying, damn, we really need a community, y'all. Like,
Right.
we got to get a
Where's
community.
our village?
You see this all the time on like social media, white people like, oh, where's the village, what are we going to do? And it's like, okay, we need to like take a step back, look at people who have been doing this for a hot minute and say, let's talk. Like, we are all affected by this, we're all under the same, and I want that to be the prevailing attitude going forward, is that I want I want the rainbow coalition back. I want us to be able to fight together for a society that cares about people. We're not always going to agree, but we can have it better. We simply can. And I'm just not accepting anyone's, again, whether it's racism, bigotry, homophobia, transphobia, whatever you want, that's a small attitude. Those are the old ways. Those are what small men think. We are not small men. We are going to take this torch forward. We're going to say enough is enough. We carry all of us forward. We're, like you said, we're not even, reparations is only the first part of it. We got to have whole truth and reconciliation. We got to hold people accountable. There's probably still people that are benefiting from that money. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Definitely corporations that are benefiting from that. Yeah.
right. So like, there's more to discuss, and we can't be afraid to have these conversations, because we don't think the wind's not going to blow our way. I'm going to say things that not every Black person is going to agree with. I'm going to say things that not every white person is going to agree with. But I'm if I have any kind of moral compass, I should be able to say, what can I do better? How can I improve? If I said something that was inappropriate, I know that I'm not the kind of person that would do that intentionally. What can I do better? Right. And so I want our politicians to do that. I want them to ask themselves that question. I want them to say, how can we fight? Who are we going to elect to represent us who will actually fight? And that means having the courage to say things that are tough, to say things that your friends and family don't want to hear, that your neighbors don't want to hear, that people have told us all this campaign the whole time that, we're anti-Semitic. Have we been called racist? We've been called, reverse racist. I've been called, like anything under the sun, you're going to get it. And it's like, all we're going to do is keep moving forward, keep saying who we are with love, with passion, and say, we are holding you all accountable. You can kick and scream if you want. We love our brothers and sisters. We love our neighbors. And that's it. No amount of you begging me to show empathy is going to have me not show empathy. If I'm a dictator of any kind, it's of empathy. It's that you will acquiesce to this
I love
empathy.
that. I love that. I love that. Austin, one of my final questions always like to ask people is, when you get elected into Congress, we want to speak it into
Yeah,
fruition.
yeah.
What are 2 bills that you want to sponsor?
Absolutely. Well, I would co-sponsor for sure Medicare for All with Bernie and Jayapal. And then one of the things that I would also, there's AOC has sponsored a Housing for All Act. And I think housing is so important. We have not just, there are a million homeless people, million people go to sleep every night on the streets, right? And it's not just a housing issue, it's a logistics issue. But right now, we don't have in government the capability to build more housing because of something called the Faircloth Amendment. So the Homes Act is something that will repeal the Faircloth Amendment and allow us to phase in governmental housing, because I believe that, if a government can't take care of the basic necessities of its people, what good is it, right? Housing is included in that, and we need to start building, right? And I would say this about any infrastructure project, whether it's the Key Bridge or whether it's housing. The public-private partnership framework, the P3 framework that we've all been loved working on, has got to go. The government needs to build this. The government needs to be funded. It needs to have strong mechanisms so that if you build public housing, it's not going to be maintained well if you don't pay to maintain it, if you don't put in the services. And so it's not just about housing or healthcare. It's about all the services that come in. Like you said, like when we're building a community needs a whole lot of services to come in, and we need people to fill those roles, right? And so I want to build housing, add community services, and put people in America to work, right? There are more jobs to do in this country than there are people to do them. There are parks that need clean. There are houses that need built. There are people that need to manage that stuff. There are people that need to drive trucks to do that for us. And we could have all of these things, but the Homes Act, Medicare for All, repealing student loan debt, and then there are 2 bills one to abolish ICE, one to hold ICE accountable for any crimes that they've committed. I would support both of those. I'm trying to think of anything I would support right off the bat, but I want to hit it like FDR. You know what I mean? Like I
Okay.
want to hit it like we're signing bills because the other thing is because of my position as a new member who is unfortunately for the leadership going to go after them first. We are going to have a put them on record, right? What we're going to do is put forth bills, no matter what they are, and enforce a vote. We're going to get it out of parliament. We're going to get it out of committee. We're going to force a vote on it. We're going to get people to say on camera, why won't they support it? Why won't they do it? Because every single second, it's like the Democrats not voting on the war powers resolution before they went on break. You allowed this person to walk out of Congress and just say, well, we don't know if it's going to pass yet. Put their names, put your name next to the line or get out of Congress. Like put your name next to it or get out because the people don't need someone. What good is it someone who won't make a decision?
Exactly.
Right? Either way. And so it's not just about one person or one idea. It's about the whole thing and kind of coming at it from a progressive perspective, but a perspective where I love people. I love and care for people. And that means I'm willing to, and unfortunately I was raised to fight for them too. So that means that we're going to fight for them and we're not going to let people hurt others that we love. So my tribe is coming, and we're here. So that's where like my whole philosophy as far as building political power. But, we're not in this just to take people out or burn the system down or whatever. This is about growing a coalition because that's where the base is. The base is progressive. 45% of Democrats under 30 call themselves socialists. Not democratic socialists, socialists.
Just socialists. Yep.
That's a large turn from even 5 years ago, right? That's all coming. We can see this, the sea changes there. But America, we're a progressive nation. We say we're progressive. We say we want to do the right thing. So let's do the right thing.
You're right. And the people are progressive and leftist. It's just the politicians who are bought out by the corporations who stop them from doing that. Austin Dyches, this has been honestly probably one of my favorite podcasts I've done. Like it's been amazing. You really have like honestly in a world that we're living in now when like it seems like the left is on like the back step so far, this has actually been something that kind of motivated me and feel like there's another leftist movement coming, and I'm really so glad to see you at the forefront of it here in Maryland. So can you please tell people how they can get involved with your campaign, stay up to date, donate, all the great things?
Oh, well, first of all, let me say thank you so much. This was a fantastic conversation. I love talking to anyone about it. And that's what I tell people. I was like, just get me in front of someone and I'll start to yap because I believe that we're on the right side of history. I know we are. And because I know that kindness is contagious and we are in a place where we are ready to move forward. We know who we are. We don't have there's no question in our hearts about what this movement is about. So that's why we will do our best to fight off the challenges as they come, but I am fully convinced that we will be successful, whether in my campaign or some other campaign. We will continue to fight this fight. So in order to help and learn more about me, you can find all that at www.austinformaryland.com. You can spell it any way you want, MD or Maryland all the way out. You can find me on Instagram and X under Austin Dyches. And I'd be happy for any volunteers. We have a volunteer sign up. We have a Discord. So come in, chat, tell us what you think. If you're in Maryland, please come out and support. We'd love to have your support. We're in the district. We're going to Anne Arundel County next week on the 20th. I do want to say we're having a late campaign kickoff and fundraising event at Backwater Books in Ellicott City. So it's a biblio pub upstairs. There's like a nice little bar and drinks, and then you've got a store and library downstairs. So it's a fantastic venue. Highly recommend if you're in Ellicott City, check it out. But we'll be there Monday, April 27th at 6:30 p.m. We're having a kickoff. So come out, say hi. We're going to do cards and button makings, and lots of progressive candidates are going to be out there to just sort of talk about their feelings and the progressive movement as a whole, as a whole now, and how we're all very excited. It's been a hard 10 years. It's been a hard while where we felt that there's been very little hope. And so we've looked around and said, no one's coming to save us. We're him, we're them. You know what I mean? Like, so it's going to do it. But we can't do that without all of your help. So Carlos, thank you to you and all your listeners. I so appreciate the opportunity and thank you for inviting me out.
Of course. And you all please remember, this is a podcast. So please like, share, subscribe, follow, do all the cool things that keep this podcast going. And remember to hit that notifications button so that you can stay up to date on every new episode that we drop. And full episodes, remember, you all come out every Wednesday. Again, Austin Dyches, thank you so much. This has been incredible and see you next time.
Thanks so much. See you next time.
Awesome.